Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are here to take an entire ocean of wisdom and distill it down into, well, the crystalline nuggets you can use right now. And today we are taking a really profound look at the liberating instructions of one of the most globally influential teachers of the last century, the great Buddhist master Ajahn Chah, known so affectionately as Luang Por.
That's absolutely right. And for this particular deep dive, we're making a very conscious choice. We are sidestepping the biographical path. We aren't here to talk about his life story or, the incredible growth of the Thai forest tradition under his guidance. Our source material is this massive collection of his transcribed teachings, and we are just cutting straight to the spiritual operating manual.
Right. So we're focused purely on the application, the how. We're looking for the patipada, the actual path of practice, and the resulting panya, which is the wisdom that he taught.
Exactly.
It's essentially the ultimate cheat sheet for spiritual cultivation.
It really is. And what stands out immediately, right from the first page of those instructions, is the totally integrated nature of the path he laid out.
Mm.
Longkor consistently stressed that the doctrine, the Dhamma, and the discipline, the Vinaya, they're a single, indivisible entity.
That's his famous comparison, isn't it?
It is. He said they were joined together like the back and palm of his hand. You can't have one without the other. They're part of the same whole.
That integrated vision feels so crucial. It means the doctrine isn't just some, abstract philosophy you debate. These teachings are intensely practical. They're aimed at realizing truth directly in the heart, right here, right now. You're not waiting for some future enlightenment.
Precisely. Because if you only study the Dhamma, you just a theoretician.
You become a theoretician. You have all the ideas, but no lived experience. But if you only practice Vinaya, you risk becoming a rigid ascetic, just following rules without understanding the why.
Right.
But when you integrate them, that's when the discipline becomes the training ground, where the doctrine is actually tested and realized. So our mission today is to extract the most practical, repeatable, and insightful instructions for immediate application in your own life. We've organized them around the classical Buddhist threefold training: morality and discipline, which is sila, then concentration, samadhi, and finally, wisdom or panya. Let's begin where all lasting spiritual journeys have to start, with that foundation of sila. Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even begin to sit down and try to deal with the chaos inside our minds, the instructions start with the body and speech. With our outward actions, we just talked about that connection between Dhamma and Vinaya. But practically speaking, how does this discipline, this Vinaya, actually translate into inner freedom? I mean, for a lot of people, following a bunch of rules it feels restrictive.
It does. And that's the paradox of the path, isn't it? It feels restrictive at first, but the Vinaya provides these clear-cut boundaries that actually prevent the practitioner from being constantly swept off the path. You're not being carried away by these powerful currents of sensual desire or, social friction. Think of it less as restriction and more like conservation of energy.
Conservation of energy, how do you mean?
Well, when you're living in any kind of communal setting, it could be a monastery, it could be a family, an office, a vast amount of your mental energy is just consumed. You're constantly having to navigate unpredictable behaviors, a little bit of social competition, maybe some mild resentments. The Vinaya just standardizes behavior.
So it takes the guesswork out of social interaction.
Exactly. When monks are carefully restrained within these clear bounds, knowing exactly what's expected in their speech and their action friction is just minimized. And this fosters mutual respect. It fosters harmony in the community. And all of that conserved mental energy can then be channeled directly into the development of mindfulness. The monk feels protected, not because the rules are some magical shield, but because his actions are pure. They prevent negative results. And that vigilance, that constant on-guard state, that is the practice.
That dual feeling of security and constant alertness. That sounds like the perfect environment for practice to flourish. And Luang Por tied this back to two qualities he saw as just absolutely foundational for human growth.
Yes, he highlighted what he called the two guardians of the world, and that's Hiri and Ottappa. These are not just abstract concepts. He saw them as the engines of the moral life. So Hiri is often translated as moral shame or conscience. It's that internal sense of revulsion, really, from performing an unwholesome act. It's a kind of self-respect and unwillingness to debase yourself.
And Ottappa. Is that the external side of it?
It's the corollary, yes. It's moral fear, or a better word is maybe moral care. It's a healthy fear of the results of unwholesome action. The fear of causing distress to others or the fear of negative karmic consequences for yourself. The two work together perfectly. Hiri keeps you from doing wrong because you value yourself. And Otapa keeps you from doing wrong because you are fully aware of the consequences on others and on your own future.
That's a beautiful system. It means morality isn't just imposed from the outside, it's a self-regulating moral compass. So how does this comprehensive foundation translate to, those of us in the lay community, people navigating careers and families?
For lay people, this internal regulation is immediately expressed through the 5 precepts. So, refraining from killing or harming, from stealing, from sexual misconduct, from lying, and from using intoxicants. And Luangpur was incredibly wise about the practicalities of life. He knew that for struggling villagers, or for people with really complex modern lives, rigid adherence might sometimes feel, well, impossible.
Right, like the first precept, non-harming, that's often difficult to uphold entirely in a world where survival might dictate some level of compromise.
Exactly. But he emphasized that the wise person gradually looks for ways to stop making bad karma altogether. So this involves a steady, gradual move toward honesty and non-harming in your livelihood. The goal is the spirit of the precept, to reduce the negative turbulence, the internal conflict, and the external retribution that comes from unwholesome actions. I mean, if your life is consistently honest and harmless, your mind has fewer objects of guilt or regret to chew on later, and so your concentration practice is immediately easier. Sila cleans the floor so samadhi can stand on it.
So once that foundation is set, what does the active day-to-day training look like? The culture at Wat Pah Pong is famous for its rigor.
It really is, and it's encapsulated perfectly in this 4-part mantra. Eat little, sleep little, talk little, practice a lot. This isn't just, some quaint advice. It's a systematic approach to austerity designed to cut the roots of indulgence right where they grow.
Okay, let's focus on the talk little component for a second. In our society today, conversation and social interaction are seen as absolutely essential for mental health. Why was this so strictly minimized?
Idle chatter and gossip. They were minimized, almost forbidden, during group activities like meals or work. And it was precisely because conversation is the primary way we habitually evade a direct confrontation with our own minds. If you're talking about sports or politics or yesterday's meal, you are using mental energy. You are pulling the mind outward. You're reinforcing your attachment to the world and to your own views. Luangpur taught that practice would only truly develop when monks were willing to face up to suffering and learn from it. And silence ensures that the moment aversion or excitement arises, you have nowhere to run except inward. Back to the breath. The mental energy that goes into planning, participating in, and then reviewing idle conversation is just enormous. Cutting it out conserves that energy for mindfulness.
That makes perfect sense. Silence is a way of forcing the mind to be the object of its own attention. And this extends to physical labor too, right? This training in small things.
Yes, the focus on care and precision in external matters is non-negotiable. Whether it was cleaning the dining hall or washing their bowls or sweeping the paths, this external diligence ensures that the very same habit flourishes in the inner world as mindfulness. Luangpur had a famous saying, something like, if you look after the spiritual pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. If you can't look after the cup in your hand, how on earth are you going to look after the much more subtle states of your mind?
And this brings us to the instruction I found most striking, this deliberate choice of activities that challenge the ego, like cleaning the toilet.
He was absolutely uncompromising on this. He encouraged cleaning toilets. He called it fitting work for monks, work hard to find.
Ugh.
It's difficult precisely because it goes against the grain of our self-importance and our aversion.
But tell us why that specific act is so spiritually potent. Why not just, sweep the floor? That's useful work.
Sweeping the floor can still feed a subtle sense of satisfaction or accomplishment. Look at this clean floor I made. Cleaning the most distasteful, dirtiest place. It forces you to confront and let go of 2 primary defilements at the same time, pride and aversion. By deliberately engaging in work you don't want to do, you are systematically eroding that sense of self that says, I am too good for this. The training is really simple. Do the things you don't want to do, and don't do the things you want to do. The physical effort is just a testing ground where the mind reveals its attachments and its repulsions.
So the spiritual benefit isn't in the cleanliness of the toilet, but in the cleanliness of the mental intention behind the act.
Exactly. It trains the mind to be impartial. And this impartiality is reinforced through simple, constant physical gestures, like the practice of bowing.
Right, monks at Wat Pah Pong bowed over 100 times a day, didn't they? How does a physical action like that, which could so easily become rote, serve as a constant reestablishment of mindfulness?
Because bowing is a physical submission. It's a literal lowering of the head and the ego, and it must be performed with presence. Luangpur warned that if you let your mind wander, If your mindfulness is poor, there will inevitably be some fault in the movement or the posture. When your mind is in an agitated, abnormal state, when you're caught in a craving or an aversion, something will always go wrong, even in the simplest physical actions. Bowing mindfully, with your full attention on the movement, reconnects the body, speech, and mind instantly. It is a daily, constant act of non-distraction.
Okay, so that external rigor of Sila sets the absolute necessary stage. Once the outer life is ordered, we go internal to develop focus or samadhi. Longkor taught that Sila, samadhi, and panya are inseparable. I love that water purification analogy. Sila handles the coarse contaminants, samadhi handles the fine sediment, and panya is the resulting clarity. So what is the core instruction for maintaining that focused mind?
The core instruction is the constant, uninterrupted presence of mindfulness, which is sati, and alertness, sampajanya. It's not enough just to be mindful. You have to be alert about your mindfulness.
This is where we need to get into the technical nuance. What is the difference, in practical terms, between sati and sampajanya?
Right. So sati is the primary act of recollection or memory. It's the mental factor that makes sure you remember your meditation object. It's the anchor. It's the awareness that says, I am observing the breath, or I am maintaining this posture. Sampajanya, clear comprehension, is like the quality control mechanism. It checks the quality of that sati.
So sati holds the object, and sampajanya judges how well it's being held. It's like a supervisor.
Precisely. Sampajanya is continuously asking, is my mind too dull right now? Is my concentration too tight? Is it leading to tension? Has the mind wandered off? But I haven't noticed yet. If sati is the shopkeeper watching the door, sampajanya is the shopkeeper realizing the kids are actually playing with the goods and then correcting the situation.
That immediate feedback loop is key. And to establish that constant presence, Luangpur had a universal tool he recommended.
Yes. He favored mindfulness of breathing, or anapanasati. He called it the crown jewel of meditation techniques. And its beauty is in its simplicity and its universal availability. It's uncomplicated, it's convenient, it's naturally present in all postures, and it's suitable for all character types. It is the perfect object for establishing an unbroken continuity of awareness.
Let's get into the detailed instructions for this. Where exactly do we anchor the mind, and how do we even begin the process?
So the initial stage is just about gaining a clear working knowledge of the breath. You note the beginning, the middle, and the end of the inhalation and the exhalation. Once this continuity is established, then you anchor your awareness at the single point where the breath is most discernible. For most people, that's the tip of the nose or maybe the upper lip.
And is there an instruction about how deeply or slowly we should be breathing? A lot of techniques suggest forcing a rhythm.
And Luangpur's instruction here was absolutely crucial. Don't force it. He advised allowing the breath to find its own natural balance. You just note whether the breath is long or short, coarse or fine, but you let the breath adjust itself naturally. If you try to control the breath, you turn it into a task, and tension arises. If the mind is calm, the breath will naturally become subtle and fine. If the mind is agitated, the breath will be coarse. We simply observe the mirror of the mind reflected in the breath. You don't have to contemplate anything else, just be the witness of the inhalation and the exhalation.
But for most beginners, and let's be honest, even experienced practitioners, the mind is a torrent of agitation, questions, self-doubt. When that voice pipes up, what's the use of this? I'm not getting calmer. How do you deal with those distracting thoughts?
The instruction is uncompromising. When thoughts arise, you just have to keep going. You don't get caught. You pin the mind down right there on the breath. And the crucial point here is recognizing the difference between a thought arising and a thought that's been indulged. The moment there is a craving to realize something, or a doubt about the value of the effort, that is techa, craving, arising. And you must immediately just throw away all your concepts, all your views, all your doubts, and return only to the body, speech, and mind in the act of practice. The thought is just a guest entering the room. We acknowledge it, but we don't invite it to stay for tea.
And if sitting becomes physically difficult or you get drowsy, there's the shift to walking meditation, Zhongguarm. What was the essential method for that practice?
Walking meditation is done at a more or less normal pace, along a path that's usually 20 to 30 paces long. It's an active way to generate energy and mindfulness. The hands are clasped lightly in front of the abdomen. And Luangpur was very specific about the posture. Never clasp your hands behind your back.
Okay, why the strict prohibition against hands behind the back? That seems like a small detail.
Because, as he pointed out, it looks like a general inspecting his troops. It often fosters this subtle sense of arrogance or detachment rather than humility and focused awareness. The aim of walking is exactly the same as sitting, to maintain constant mindfulness and alertness. You're developing an awareness that is easily integrated into daily life. It proves that cultivation is carried on in every posture, standing, walking, sitting, lying down. The path isn't limited to the cushion.
Now for the real battleground, the 5 hindrances that continually arise to derail practice. Let's tackle the most powerful one, sensual desire. We live in a world that is just saturated with appealing sensory objects.
Sensual desire arises naturally. It's a part of our conditioned nature. But the instruction is to completely refuse to indulge it. Luangpur often used very strong, very evocative imagery to cut through romantic delusion.
Give us the specific image he used.
He warned that if you still enjoy the form, the odor, or the fantasy of an attractive person, you are still allowing the cobra to spread its hood. And that image is so profound because a cobra's hood is beautiful, it's enticing, but it is a prelude to poison. Giving harbor to sexual thoughts and fantasies just creates this vicious circle. The more you indulge the thoughts, the weaker your samadhi becomes, and the less able you are to protect your mind. The only way out is to completely break that cycle by seeing the thoughts as they are, merely conditions of the mind, and refusing to feed them.
What about the mental hindrance of doubt, Rishikesh? This is particularly challenging for people who, rely on critical thinking in their professional lives.
Doubt, like all states, is understood through the lens of impermanence. It is maine, changeful, and unreliable. If you rush about after your doubts, trying to solve them, reading books to answer them, seeking external validation, they will only increase. Doubt feeds on that kind of investigation when the mind lacks focus. Instead, we have to treat doubt like a fire. Simply observe the heat and the smoke, but don't add any more fuel.
But doesn't the path require confidence or faith, sadha? If we treat all doubt as unreliable, how do we distinguish between helpful, critical reflection and just hindering anxiety?
And that's where the advanced instruction comes in. Luangpur taught that for practitioners who reach a certain point, there is a risk of becoming rigidly convinced of their own progress or their own views. So to counteract this, meditators need to temper their confidence with a gentle, maybe not.
A gentle maybe not, even if they feel absolutely certain they have achieved some insight.
Yes. Even if you are completely convinced you are right about the Dhamma or your practice, you must reserve a small, soft space for the possibility of being wrong. This prevents the mind from hardening into fixed views, or ditthi, which is just another form of attachment. It makes the mind flexible, careful, and supremely nuanced in its attitudes toward its own knowledge. It's a protection against spiritual pride.
Finally, we have to address the intense physical discomfort and pain that can arise during long sitting sessions. The body is just screaming for you to move. What is the instruction when the body is truly suffering?
The instruction is clear. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. We have to train ourselves not to move out of reactivity that's bred from fear or anxiety. So the first step is always to turn attention away from the pain by repeatedly returning to your meditation object, the breath.
And why is that so critical? Why not just shift your leg?
Because if you move immediately, you reinforce the mind's deeply conditioned belief that it must flee from discomfort. You reinforce the identification, I am this painful body. Luangpur taught that you must observe the pain as just a condition and see that moving won't eliminate its underlying cause, which is the inherent decay of all conditions. Only if the mind remains agitated after repeated attempts to return to the object, after exhausting your mindful observation, then you may move. But not before. You want the move to be an act of considered, non-reactive choice, not a desperate escape.
So we have the scaffolding, the disciplined life, sila, and the focused mind, samadhi. This leads us to the heart of the matter. Panya, wisdom. Luangpur constantly emphasized right view, saying it was the cool heart of the Dhamma. So what are the key truths that we must realize to achieve that insight, and what specific instruction helps us get there?
The wisdom element is entirely centered on the contemplation of the 3 non-negotiable characteristics of existence, which are impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, dukkha, and not-self, anatta. We look closely at phenomena to see how they truly are, rather than accepting the pleasant fictions our minds create about them.
Let's start with countering the most pervasive physical delusion, attachment to our own bodies. What was the practical method Luangpur used to break that spell?
He encouraged intense, structured reflection on the body's inherent unattractiveness or asubha. The goal is to see the body not as this unified, attractive entity, but as a composite of its constituent elements, earth, water, fire, and air. He would ask disciples to contemplate the specific parts, the hair, the teeth, the skin, the internal organs.
Give us that famous example he used to shock people out of their physical attachment.
He would ask, is hair beautiful? Is it clean? If you gathered up a pile of it by the side of the road, would anyone pick it up and take it home to admire? He went even further. He'd suggest you take off your skin, the boundary we identify with. Put it by the side of the road, and then check tomorrow on your alms round to see if anyone has decided to steal it. The point is to stop seeing these things through the delusion of beauty and permanence, which is the root of raga, lust, or attachment. The body is simply an earth element package, and its eventual decay is a fact, not a personal tragedy.
Wow. That is highly effective. And it brings us to what I feel is really the cornerstone of his entire teaching, which is the law of change.
Yes. Mai Nai. This concept is inescapable in Ajahn Chah's teaching. Mai Nai literally means changeful, unreliable, uncertain. Luang Por declared that Mai Nai is the Buddha himself. It is a Dhamma made manifest in every single moment of reality. If you know that all conditions are changeful, he said, you know the highest truth.
So how do we operationalize this truth? When a strong emotion hits or when we face a professional crisis, how do we use Mai Nai as a tool?
This recollection has to be constant. It acts as an immediate firewall against attachment. When the mind is planning the future, when a sudden rush of excitement or sorrow arises, or even when a negative memory flares up, you immediately inject the truth. It's changeful. Mai Nai.
And what happens psychologically when we do that? What's the mechanism?
Our minds lie to us. Constantly. When we like something, the mind insists that the pleasure will last forever. When we dislike something, the mind insists the suffering will be permanent. By recollecting Mai Nai, you immediately divide things up 50-50, maybe not, This prevents the mind from fully investing its energy. It prevents the solidifying of the thought or the feeling. This dynamic awareness accelerates wisdom because you stop clinging to outcomes. If your successful project ends, you say, Mai Nai, that was inevitable. If a failure strikes, Mai Nai, this too shall pass. And this brings a profound, sustainable, emotional equilibrium.
Moving from the nature of phenomena to the nature of our effort, Luang Por was a champion of the middle way, which he expressed using the term Por Di. That means the just right amount. How do we, particularly in a high-pressure modern world, find that balance in our efforts?
Finding Por Di, the optimum amount of effort, so you're not straining too much, but you're not being too lax, is challenging because our defilements are so subtle. If you aim exactly for what feels right, you will likely fall short because the inertia of laziness or craving will just pull you down.
That's why he gave that counterintuitive instruction to aim slightly higher than Por Di.
Exactly. He taught that it is wisest to pitch your practice, whether it's the duration of your meditation or the strictness of your self-discipline, at a slightly more demanding level than you currently believe to be Por Di.
And the mechanism for that, how does that work?
You allow for the natural strength of the defilements to carry you down to the correct, just right level. It's like aiming a boat across a swiftly flowing river. You have to aim slightly upstream, knowing the current will carry you straight across to the opposite bank. The required intensity, he often stated, will be worked out by doing it, not by philosophical planning. Por Di is a dynamic, shifting realization, not some fixed measure.
He applied this balance intensely to physical needs, too, specifically eating. What were his practical instructions on moderation at the table?
He taught his disciples to practice strict moderation, usually eating just one meal per day. But the specific instruction for lay people or those taking multiple meals was very precise. When you sit down to eat, you estimate when you're approximately 3 mouthfuls short of being full, and then you stop. Immediately.
Stopping when you're still slightly hungry.
Yes. And then you drink water until you feel full. Eating too much, he warned, just makes one dull, sleepy, and restless. It inhibits practice. The mind becomes cloudy, and you can't walk or sit with sufficient alertness. This deliberate moderation trains the mind to overcome greed and prevents the physical body from becoming an obstacle to concentration.
Let's turn back to the ultimate insight, letting go of the self and nada. Luang Por taught that liberation comes from seeing things in their true light, not through trying to suppress feelings. How do we differentiate between suppression and genuine insight?
The distinction lies entirely in identification, in clinging. We often try to suppress our anger, our fear, our desire, but that only pushes the state deeper into the subconscious, and it creates tension. Insight, however, involves seeing the mental state arise, realizing it is adi, it's not self, and then letting it pass without claiming ownership.
This is the context for his famous cobra simile, right?
It is the perfect illustration. Mental states. Positive feelings, sukha, and negative feelings, dukkha. They're like poisonous snakes, cobras. They exist in the environment of the mind. You must observe them. You must know their nature, that they're poisonous. But the moment they arise, the key is, don't touch them.
And what is the mechanism of suffering if you do touch the cobra? What does that mean?
Touching them means taking hold of them. It means identifying with them, saying, I am angry, or this happiness is mine. Identifying with a mental state is like letting yourself be bitten by the cobra. The poison is suffering, dukkha. So we observe the cobra, we acknowledge its presence, we let it slither by, and we do not assume ownership or responsibility for its coming and its going.
The ultimate goal, then, is a mind state that's beyond the immediate swings of pleasure and pain.
Precisely. That profound peace comes through dwelling in the awareness of the true nature of conditions, their impermanence and their lack of self, without attachment to either pole. If you attach to the pleasant, the sukha, or you fight the unpleasant, the dukkha, there can be no liberation.
He also gave a very practical, almost scientific test for this not self-teaching, the instruction to try and control anger.
This is a perfect application of anatta. He advised students to set a clock down in front of them and then vow for their anger to disappear at exactly 2 hours. If anger truly belonged to you, if it was yours, you would have absolute instantaneous power over it, just like you control your own hand.
Yet the reality is the anger might dissipate in 15 minutes, or it might stubbornly linger for 3 hours.
And since it comes and goes by its own nature, dictated by conditions and causes that are outside of yourself, it is not self. You don't own it, and you cannot command it. If you identify with it, if you say, I am an angry person, you suffer. Seeing this ownerless nature of conditions is the supreme remedy for suffering caused by identification.
So this wisdom has to be brought into the real, messy world. Luangpur constantly stressed patient endurance or forbearance as the virtuous quality that burns up the defilements. This sounds difficult. It seems to require a real willingness to embrace pain.
It does. Luangpur had an uncompromising attitude. He viewed suffering itself as the greatest teacher, as the essential classroom. The willingness to endure difficult states without reacting. That is the highest form of practice.
We have that famous story of Ajahn Brahmavamsa when he was hospitalized. It sounds like a pretty harsh lesson.
It was intended to cut through attachment to the body. When the monk was hospitalized with a high fever, he was near delirium, and Luangpur visited him. And he offered very little comfort, but he offered absolute truth. He told the monk there were only 2 possible outcomes to his illness: getting better or not getting better. And the practitioner should be equally at peace with both of those possibilities.
That completely reframes physical decay.
It does. The lesson is that the decay of the body is the manifestation of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, impermanence, suffering, and not self. You must be able to be at peace with the body, whatever state it is in, and not let the mind deteriorate along with the physical conditions. The body is always going to fail. The mind does not have to.
I found the instruction on facing life-threatening fear, what you call the weapon of Dhamma, to be the most powerful application of this endurance.
That is the ultimate test of letting go. When you're facing extreme, life-threatening fear, whether it's a high fever, a major accident, or encountering a tiger during Tudong, the natural inclination is to panic and cling to life. Luangpur's instruction was the exact opposite. Forget about this life completely. Let go entirely and be ready to die.
And what happens when you abandon all concern for survival?
The clinging that fuels the fear immediately dissolves. The power that's summoned by abandoning all concern for the self is accompanied by this profound calm, this clarity, this wisdom, this readiness to die as the weapon of Dhamma. It triumphs because at that moment you have transcended the fear of the self being destroyed, because you have already mentally relinquished the self. That non-reactive state is impregnable.
This really shows that cultivation is carried out everywhere, not just on the cushion. Where does he locate the practice in the 4 postures?
Cultivation is carried on in every single posture. Standing, walking, sitting, lying down. It means consistently trying to make your thinking correct. What he called tuktam. Conforming your thoughts to the true, changeful, and ownerless nature of things. Luangpur once summarized the Buddha's entire teaching with 3 words. Dhamma means correctness. If your thoughts conform to reality, you are practicing Dhamma.
Okay, but many listeners might feel overwhelmed by the level of commitment required here. How did Luangpur advise those with families, with jobs, people who can't go live in the forest, those who feel fundamentally inadequate for this?
He spoke directly to that feeling of intellectual or spiritual inadequacy, often using the analogy of illiteracy. Lay people would come to him saying they couldn't meditate because they weren't scholarly or because they were illiterate. And he would ask them, why do you need to be literate? You put your hand in the fire, you will know it is hot without reading a book.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning, you don't need academic knowledge to understand suffering. You already know that suffering arises when the mind is caught between hot and cold, between liking and disliking. That understanding, that direct felt knowledge of the difference between being caught and letting go, that is the Dhamma. And it's right here, in your body and mind, accessible immediately, regardless of your background.
He also had advice for those worried about family responsibilities, where duty often clashes with non-attachment, specifically in raising children.
He used the analogy of the potter shaping pots. The potter's job is to keep their attention focused on making the pot well, ensuring their actions are diligent and wholesome and skillful. They have to dedicate themselves fully to the process. Then once the pot is finished, they must let it go to market. The result, how the pot fares, or how the child turns out, that's the child's own business, born of their own unique conditions and karma.
So you practice skilled effort, but you let go of the possessive attachment to the outcome.
Exactly. And this reframes family duty from a source of endless anxiety and attachment into a source of mindful, present effort. Your job is the moment of making the pot well. The future of the pot is determined by countless conditions you cannot possibly control.
And finally, a really challenging piece of advice. When people worried about death, he told them not to worry about their family when they're gone, saying who look after them is just the world. What did he mean by that definition of the world?
He defined the world as whatever mental state is agitating you at the present moment. The worry about the future of your family, who will look after them, is merely the world arising in your mind, pulling you away from the present reality and causing stress. These worries are mané. They're not solid truth, they are just thoughts.
And what is the wise response to that?
He taught that you must think with wisdom and an awareness of change. You leave behind whatever you have clung to. If you have many possessions and a lot of attachment, you leave a lot behind, and you suffer. If you have few possessions and little attachment, you leave few behind, and your mind is at peace. This clarity allows you to let go of the mind that is at peace with the conditions of existence. Hashtag outro. So to synthesize the profound knowledge we've gathered today, the path taught by Ajahn Chah is just seamless and holistic. We practice external discipline, sila, to eliminate distraction and conserve our mental energy. We use that energy to support internal focus, samadhi, that constant awareness and alertness, sati and sampajanya. And we use that refined focus to gain liberating insight, panya, into the changeful, ownerless nature of everything, summarized by that one word, mind nai. When the mind operates according to this truth, it becomes its own natural, normal state undisturbed, like leaves in a windless place. This is the profound peace he promised.
This has been an incredibly detailed and practical guide to the inner life. And for the listener who now feels motivated but wonders how to maintain this level of dedication in a busy life, what was Luang Por's most consistent advice to his students about sustaining the practice?
His advice was always to simplify and prioritize consistency over quantity. He told students, you have to discover it for yourself. It's not how much you meditate. You can do just a little, but you must do it every day. He emphasized that heedfulness, diligence, and patient endurance were the true keys to steady progress. Do a lot or a little, but be heedful and do it every single day.
That brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull or explore on your own as you continue your own journey. Luang Por once said that the Buddha is still present, right now. He answered his own question about where the Buddha is, right there, in the impermanence and unreliability of things, in Mainé. If you truly grasp and understand this point now, you are, he insisted, exactly the same as the Buddha. Investigate that.